Of course, there's no readily recognizable object in heaven that would be identifiable as a ladder, but confronted with this image, which is found literally everywhere, it's pretty obvious that that might be interpreted as a ladder-like structure. But notice the sun, the circular object, always has a black dot in the middle, unlike the present sun. So that is one of the first clues that we're looking at a different celestial object than the familiar sun in our sky. So that is really the most important finding of our research, is that the sun of the creation myth, the sun of our prehistoric sky watchers vigilantly watched and worshiped, is not the present sun.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Sensible Hippie podcast. I'm your host, the Sensible Hippie. Today we have an extraordinary guest joining us, Ev Cochrane. Some of you might recognize him from his intriguing contribution on the Electric Universe series on the Gaia station. But today, he's here to dive into something even more captivating, his new book, The Case of the Turquoise Sun, a title that promises to take us on an incredible journey through cosmic mystery and ancient myths. Before we bring Ev into the conversation, I want to take a moment to thank all of you, my amazing listeners, for your continued support. Your reviews and your follows mean the world to me, and it helps to keep this show growing. So if you haven't done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a positive review. Without further ado, let's welcome Ev Cochrane to the show.
Thank you very much for hosting me. My name is Ev Cochrane, and I live in Iowa. I attended Iowa State University. I'm an independent researcher looking into ancient history, especially archaeoastronomy. I've written a series of books on the recent history of the solar system, and the most recent book is called The Case of the Turquoise Sun.
Yeah, I love that. I love this book. I actually have it. Did you get your copy yet?
Yes.
You did. Yay. Well, I love the cover of your book, by the way. It's absolutely beautiful. And the title, Case of the Turquoise Sun, it immediately grabs your attention. And the concept behind that is equally as fascinating. Could you share with us what inspired you to explore the idea of the sun itself being turquoise, and what journey led you to delve into this concept?
You bet. So one of our main areas of research is ancient myth and the interface between ancient myth and science. So a primary area of focus is creation myths. We have spent a great deal of time investigating the earliest creation myths on the planet, let's say from ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, Mesoamerica, or ancient India. What you find in each of those cultures are descriptions of the birth of the first sun, and that sun presents a brilliant turquoise color. And so that anomaly kind of got us started down this adventure to try and reconstruct exactly what was going on and what did the ancient sky watchers see.
So, in your view as a mythologist, do you think ancient artworks around the world depicting spectacular skies could be interpretation of plasma events? How do you connect that with myths with your studies?
That's a good question. Basically, after we looked at the ancient myths, we tried to look at ancient artworks to see if those would complement the stories and the myths. Like on cave walls all around the world, there are what mainstream scientists consider to be pictures of the sun. The only problem with that is none of those pictures resemble the current sun. Resemble the image on the screen here, for example. I'll put up another one right now. This is the image we call the ladder to heaven, but you'll be familiar from the Old Testament and other sources that cultures all around the world speak of a ladder of heaven. Of course, there's no readily recognizable object in heaven that would be identifiable as a ladder. But confronted with this image, which is found literally everywhere, it's pretty obvious that that might be interpreted as a ladder-like structure. But notice the sun, the circular object always has a black dot in the middle, unlike the present sun. So that is one of the first clues that we're looking at a different celestial object than the familiar sun in our sky. So that is really the most important finding of our research, is that the son of the creation myth, the son of our prehistoric sky watchers vigilantly watched and worshiped, is not the present sun. So that is a revolutionary finding. If corroborated, would change the history of astronomy for sure. And so you asked about plasma science. I'm going to show a different picture here. So the gentleman in the blue shirt, the third one from the left, is my co-collaborator, David Talbot, who just celebrated his 80th birthday. David's the author of a book called The Saturn Myth, which came out in 1980. And that's about when I met him. And we've been participating in a 40-some year collaboration ever since. It's kind of our combined efforts that have led to this theory. And each year we would hold a conference where we would invite some of the top scientists in the world to come and speak. And in 2000, the gentleman on the far left joined us. His name is Tony Peratt. And I'm sure you've seen the Oppenheimer movie, but that takes place at the Los Alamos lab. Well, Tony has ran the Los Alamos lab for the last 30 years. And so he's one of the world's leading experts on plasma science. The gentleman next to him is C.J. Ransom, who's also a plasma scientist. And the gentleman on the far right is Wal Thornhill, who unfortunately recently passed here about Christmas time. Just one of the world's great guys, very close collaborator of Dave and mine. And his website is called holoscience.com. And you can find there some of the most impressive evidence in favor of the catastrophes we're talking about and the plasma-based nature of the solar system, especially in prehistoric times. So those four gentlemen are absolute giants in this field, and they're my closest collaborators. Just a word or two about Tony's research, since it might not be familiar to your viewers. In 2000, when he came to our conference, he had never heard of our work. So he had no idea we were talking about planets on different orbits, or we were talking about pictographs or ancient myths or any of that stuff. At that particular conference, I was talking about the ladder of heaven and showing that particular picture we just looked at. And he kind of jumped up and said, "My goodness, where did you get these pictures? Because these are the exact images I get in the laboratory. And these are top secret experiments that no one's ever seen before." And that kind of started a conversation that lasted for the better part of the weekend. And then Tony and Dave and I would get together in Phoenix and try and brainstorm, the basic theories behind plasma science. And that led Tony to produce a epic-making article in IEEE magazine, where he documented pictographs from every inhabited continent on Earth. And he showed where these images agree in excruciating detail all around the globe. Clearly, they were seeing something in the sky that is not there today. And so I would urge readers to check out his website, which is called Plasma Universe. They can track down his various scholarly works, but absolutely a scientist that just has completely revolutionized our work, and a very, very diligent researcher, because he climbed all these mountains and took pictures himself and charted them, used GPS, and it was an amazing, heroic undertaking, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I think I've seen some of his work with the pyramids, the lightnings that may have come across at the top of the pyramids, the different Mayan pyramids as well. Was that all? I think was all of that his work that he discovered?
I don't believe that is his work, but he's got so much stuff out there that who knows?
I see. And I didn't know about Wallace. I'm really sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, that was an absolute shocker because he was without question the healthiest 80-year-old I've ever met in my life. And he looked about 50 and he was sharp as a tack. And so it's a huge loss to our community, that's for sure. But we're trying to carry on his work and keep it alive because obviously it's not a best-selling phenomenon at this point. It's little known.
Yeah, sorry. Could you share the key myths or evidence that guided you towards the concept of this turquoise sun?
You bet. So the oldest body of writings on the planet Earth are the so-called pyramid texts. And these are writings that are literally carved into the pyramid walls in about 2400 BCE. So they are super old and they're super complicated and very detailed in nature. And they clearly describe the sun having brilliant green rays. And this is actually fairly well attested in the scientific literature written up by Egyptologists. It's just they don't do anything with it. They will make statements like it's frequently said that the sun shines a brilliant green, and then they just let it go, and or they come up with some completely bogus reason why that might be the case, and they never connect the fact that the same exact thing is said in ancient Mexico or around the globe. And so that's really been my contribution, is to try and take a comparative perspective of the ancient Egyptian texts and try and show where the same basic phenomenon is being described all around the world.
Yeah, do you have any kind of photos that can compare those?
Yeah, there's a couple here, but the bottom line is let's start with this one. So this one is back from the Neolithic time. So this is probably roughly 4000 BC. So it's very, very old. These are from the Irish megaliths. And so if we look at this object here, it kind of looks like a flower, an eight-petaled flower, let's say. Again, according to the Egyptian pyramid text, the ancient sun presented the appearance of the flower. If you turn to ancient Mexico, you find that the Mayan picture of the sun that they use in their written language, Maya language, is a four-petaled flower. That's their word for sun, or their logogram for sun. Part of the case of the turquoise sun is documenting that cultures around the globe describe the sun as a flower-like object with these brilliant green petals. And so this is a very early and interesting image to that effect. This is a familiar image from Mesopotamia. And again, you can pick up any book in the library and the top experts in the world will say, yes, this is the sun. The sun is shining in conjunction with the moon. But again, it doesn't take a genius to see that that doesn't look like the sun, and the moon can never appear in conjunction with the sun like this. This is a physical impossibility in today's skies, but you can see that our sun does not present that type of object. Okay, so here's another classic picture of the sun from ancient Mesopotamia. Again, it doesn't resemble our sun at all. It looks like an object with a eight-pointed star on it, set inside a crescent. Here's a little bit different picture. Again, kind of a four-petaled flower-like object. Here's another one from Egypt, a kind of a four-petaled flower-like object. Here's one of the most exciting findings. This is one of the most common images in all of Mesoamerica, and it's called a quincunx. And I think most Mayan scholars would say it has something to do with the planet Venus, but they all say these are not representational pictures. In other words, it's not something in the sky. This is some kind of a symbol that the Mayans dreamed up, to describe the four phases of Venus or some other hypothetical theory that they come up with. But we can show where this is from Mesopotamia. It's the exact same image. So it shows a four rayed star in the middle with these four circles around it. And so clearly, from our perspective, this is something that was seen in the sky. Now, here is a picture from Tony's Los Alamos lab that was created before he ever heard of us. And what this is showing on the left here is high energy lightning bolts basically being sent through metallic spheres, call them little planets. And you see the four energy fields here. Again, they have the same energy of the sun. So these are unbelievably powerful things. And at the start, they kind of compress into a four-shaped object here, but over here, which is a slightly later phase in the experiment, you get a flower-like object. These plasma experiments are done on a small scale, in a room somewhere in Los Alamos, top secret, but these plasma experiments are scalable. So this same phenomenon that you see at let's say this was 6 inches wide originally, it would scale across the entire universe. So something like this was clearly seen in the sky by our prehistoric ancestors. Otherwise, these images wouldn't show up on cave walls everywhere in Mesopotamian cylinder seals. So that's our argument.
Wow, that's incredible. It's actually quite beautiful. And if they actually saw that, I wonder if they're seeing the same colors. Do you think they're seeing the same colors of the green and the purple that was there?
They're absolutely seeing green for sure. They're seeing a wide range of colors depending upon the amount of energy coming from those plasma or those lightning bolts. Basically, when Tony's doing his experiments, he is changing the energy level coming in to these metallic spheres. And with the changes in energy, you get different images. For example, you can get swastika-like images, and they may be what looks like a real swastika, let's say four arms. Another one, change the energy, you might get 3 arms. It all boils down to the amount of energy coming in. And obviously, Tony would be the guy to speak on that. Or CJ Ransom, the other fellow in that picture, he has actually done the experiments in a plasma lab showing the swastikas. But we are, from Dave Talbot and my perspective, we are primarily focused on the most stable images in ancient artworks. And so that's why we've kind of focused on the flower-like objects and or a cross-like object. So this is our reconstruction of what the sun looked like. But if we go to, here's an early Mesopotamian picture of the sun. And again, it's the same exact image. It's a disc with a cross in the middle, but a crescent underneath. And so by comparing these respective images, you can just see what's happened is the central image is just changed in shape. What might be a cross in one picture is a 4-petaled flower in another picture, and so on.
Yeah, that one
Or a
photo almost
4-rayed
looked
star
like,
in another picture.
yeah, That one photo almost looked like the Stairway to Heaven or the Jacob's Ladder.
This one?
No, it was the photo that you just showed of the Sumerian, maybe it was the Sumerian art. And in the background, it looked like, if you look back, you could see the flower, but yet there was something going down. It almost looked like the Stairway to Heaven. Not that one. Not that one. It was just the example that you just showed. Um,
I'm just right here, I bet,
oh, there,
ma'am.
the one with the wall.
That
Yeah,
one?
the wall art. The one that's right below your green sun. That one. Yes, that
That's
one.
the one I have up
Yeah.
now.
Yes, yes. That one, look at that spiral. That
So
almost looks like that could be the stairs going to the sun.
absolutely, it absolutely could.
It
And so
could be.
again, if the picture was a little better, you can see that it's a four-rayed star here and the four energy fields, and then there's a crescent underneath it. And like you say, there's a chain, let's call it a chain of rings leading from the bottom of that.
Yeah, that's
And
beautiful. Is is
yeah,
this
it's
the same thing that you talk about in your book, The Blossom of Creation?
yes, yep. So here's again the same image. It's just a little easier to see the four-rayed star here. So here's a Chinese petroglyph from about 4000 BC. And again, you get kind of the same idea of a sun-like object sitting in conjunction with a crescent-like object. And this is the mythological motif that we call the world mountain or the world pillar. And so the traditions all around the globe will always say that the ancient sun god stood still on top of the world mountain. And that is a good image describing that particular myth, which has no explanation apart from this, as far as we can tell.
Yeah, that almost looks like ancient Chinese and Japanese rooftops, the way it goes out like
It's
that.
exactly correct. Well, and the reason for that is because the pagodas themselves were designed to emulate the celestial structure, just like the pyramids were, and just like the Mesopotamian ziggurats were. They are modeled to emulate the celestial structure in the sky, which was known as the house of the gods, of course. So it was, you know, super sacred to them, and very important that they incorporate that into their culture. So let me just show you one more image just while we're talking about Tony's stuff. But if you just change the energy field just a little bit now, you get this swastika-like look. You see how the four-rayed star now has these little flames coming out of it that kind of resemble a swastika. And this is, in the grand scheme of things in ancient myth, is the thunderbolt of the gods. That's kind of where the Thunderbolts universe took their name from. Is we've spent a great deal of time trying to figure out what was the nature of the ancient thunderbolt of Zeus and these other respective gods that, according to the Greeks, controlled the universe and or caused all these phenomenal catastrophes. This gives you a thumbnail sketch of what that looked like originally.
I want to talk about the planets as first gods. So, in your research, you mentioned that the first gods were planets. How do you think this perspective changes our understanding of ancient religion and mythologies?
Well, it has a profound lesson, I would say. But again, we just didn't pull this out of thin air. What we tried to do was go back to the earliest writings in the world from Egypt and Mesopotamia. So if you take Mesopotamia, for example, their pictograph for God was literally an eight-pointed star. all top scholars will admit that the Mesopotamian idea of God was a star or celestial in nature. The Greek god Zeus's name by etymology means star or sky. It's clearly a celestial object. The earliest gods in Egypt and or Mesopotamia, they are always identified with a star or a planet. For example, the earliest writings in Sumeria describe the catastrophic adventures of the goddess Inanna that I'm sure you're familiar with. And she causes all these catastrophes in the sky when she takes on the appearance of a dragon and rains fire and storm from the sky. Well, Inanna is clearly identified in those texts already at 3000 BC with the planet Venus. You find the exact same story told in ancient Egypt. So these are unbelievably old stories, prehistoric in nature, recorded in the very first texts that mankind ever created, or that, so far as we know anyway. And they clearly testify to the fact that the earliest remembered gods were identified with celestial objects.
I believe you talk in your book about Venus, the planet of Venus in ancient Mesopotamia. How does ancient cultures maybe mythologize Venus and the bright star that appeared and its unique movements? I think like its retrograde motion. How do you, based on your study, think that they came up with that with Venus?
Let me go back to a picture here. So this was one of the first things that Dave and I did. This is supposed to simulate that picture of the sun where you have a circular disc with a dot in the middle. And we had deduced that the first red dot there is the planet Mars, and the green one was Venus. And the yellow one is Saturn. And so what we did, we had a engineering company, a world famous engineering company, put a Saturn-like sized object on a computer, a Venus-sized object and a Mars-sized object, and placed them, let's say 100,000 miles distant from each other. And what kind of a picture would come up? And well, this is what came up. So this is included on most of our books. So the green object is Venus. In ancient myth, you will always find that Mars and Venus are lovers. Mars approaches Venus, enters into Venus, appears as Venus's, tiny little warrior or infant on her lap. The myths seem to be describing a close conjunction of Mars and Venus. It's everything else, all the other stories surrounding the planets take their origin from movements of these planets in relationship to each other. So that's kind of what we describe in our books is the various different phases in the evolution of this polar column of planets. As we've seen earlier, as at some point in time, a ladder-like structure descends from the center of this object. At one point in time, Venus departs entirely and takes on a comet-like appearance and moves about the circumpolar heavens. And so that is, in ancient Egypt, it's the myth of the departing eye, which, causes major catastrophe and puts mankind at the brink of extinction. And again, that story is told already in the early pyramid text, so it's clearly a prehistoric story. But you can trace the history of that Venus comet in great detail, and we've produced several books doing exactly that.
That almost looks like the circle with the dot in the middle, like the symbol of gold. Does that have any relation with that?
Oh, okay.
So what is it?
That one is new to me. I do.
You know what I'm talking about? What is it called? Circumpunk? I don't remember. The circle with the dot in the middle in
I'm
ancient
not
text.
familiar with that, but
Really? Okay.
nothing would surprise me.
That's quite interesting. How long ago did you think maybe this could have happened?
Well, we are obviously in prehistoric times, it's pretty difficult to date things, but we take our cue from the fact that the earliest cave art from, let's say, the Paleolithic period, roughly 20,000 years ago to 30,000 years ago, our viewers may be familiar with these unbelievably beautiful pictures of bison or antelopes, totally realistic in nature. Just they're all over the cave walls of France and Spain. So that's what dominates the art during the Paleolithic period. There are no planets, there are no suns, there's no moons depicted. If you move to the Neolithic period, however, you start getting images like we showed earlier. You get these images that are clearly celestial in nature. In the center there's a circle with a dot inside it, which is the Egyptian pictograph for the word sun. But this is roughly 4000 BC. I would guess that these catastrophes involving the planets, probably date from somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 years ago. It will take more time to date them, that's for sure. All we can do at this point is date them in relative terms. We know that they preceded the building of the pyramids, for example.
Wow. Do you think that this coincides with the biblical narrative of the Noah's Ark, that catastrophe happening? Or was this something possibly before?
It would open a can of worms to discuss that at this point, but certainly the planetary catastrophes we are talking about were remembered as the universal deluge. There's no doubt that the flood story told in the Old Testament will reference these same cataclysmic events.
That's fascinating. And it's also fascinating to see that across various cultures worldwide, Mars is often depicted as the warrior or hero. Venus is associated with femininity, beauty. What do you think accounts for these remarkable consistencies with legends and myths across the globe from one corner to the next?
Well, again, from our standpoint, and again, I've written, several books on Mars mythology, several books on Venus mythology. And so our argument is that the behavior of the god of the planets in the sky determined the stories told about them. So the stories are as literal as they can be, describing the movements of Venus. So when Venus is described as a dragon causing catastrophes from the sky and raining fire down on Inanna is also said to rain the flood down, by the way. Those aren't metaphorical statements. Those are real happenings. And so the same story is not just told in Mesopotamia, but it will be told in Egypt and elsewhere. We are the first scholars, so far as I know, to take those stories as relatively accurate statements of what the ancients were witnessing. But certainly, so Mars is the same way. Mars' relationship as a warrior will certainly trace to his behavior in conjunction with that polar configuration of planets. It would be fairly complicated, probably wouldn't make any sense to try and summarize it in short order here, but it is summarized at great length in my various books. Well, clearly, one of the most important myths involving Mars is his torrid love affair with Venus. And so most modern readers will be familiar with Homer's account of Ares loving Aphrodite, but the same story is told in numerous cultures. To give an example, the most important ritual in ancient Sumeria describes Inanna as the planet Venus, and she's involved in a sacred marriage with another celestial body. And the general history of that sacred marriage is reflected in Homer's account and these other accounts of Mars and Venus as well. The Skidi Pawnee of North America also associate the planet Venus with the sacred marriage And there, the sacred marriage is with the warrior Mars. And they describe in great detail what these two planets did. And it's an unbelievably fascinating story. And I have a chapter on that in the case of the Turquoise Sun, and several books dedicated to that subject. But from my standpoint, the evidence is pretty conclusive.
Do you concur with Velikovsky's idea regarding the celestial phenomenon and their impact on the ancient civilization?
I should have mentioned him earlier, probably. But basically, Dave Talbot first came to national attention as the publisher of a journal called Pensée. And so that would have been in the early 70s. Velikovsky's book, Worlds in Collision, came out in 1950 and caused an international uproar. And it kind of died down. People kind of forgot about it. Well, Dave's journal regenerated interest during the 70s. So they put out 10 issues discussing Velikovsky's theories, interviewing all these famous scientists. And it culminated in a bunch of world conferences involving such folks as Carl Sagan and on and on and on. It was really kind of exciting stuff. So that was Dave's first introduction to this material. And he was friends with Velikovsky and certainly was definitely inspired by Velikovsky, as was Wall. So Velikovsky was the first one to claim that the planet Venus only recently moved on a different orbit, same with Mars. Unfortunately, he wanted to explain those myths as relatively recent events. So let's say 700 BC. So at some point he argues that the story told in the Iliad is actually these Venus catastrophes. Well, we don't buy that because we've shown where these disasters were clearly prehistoric in nature. Velikovsky's particular scheme cannot be squared with the Babylonian astronomical texts, which describe the planets as being securely on their present orbits in early BC times. It's just a matter of historical record that Talbot and Wall were very influenced by Velikovsky for sure.
You argue that the myths of creations are eyewitness accounts to cataclysmic events. I couldn't imagine what that would have been like. I think I've read that you could possibly hear what was going on, the thunder, and actually see the cataclysm. I guess the events that was going on must have been terrifying. And I guess the ancient people were trying to depict that with their rituals, with the drums going and the makeups that they put on and things like that. Were they, I guess, replaying what they had saw or stories that was told to them?
You are absolutely right on that score, and that's essentially what our books and research is all about, is trying to document how these catastrophic events are reflected in early rituals. But to give you an example, earlier we saw those pictures of sun-like objects with what looked like a cross in the middle. And so the creation stories of all peoples will describe a situation where the cosmos is divided into four corners. And let's say the creator God sends out four arrows to the four corners, or he makes streets leading to the four corners of the universe, et cetera, et cetera. And so when the first cities came to be designed, whether it's in ancient China or ancient Mesoamerica, they will have four roads radiating out from the center of the city. It's the same type of thing when the ancient cultures got together and danced or played their music. They were always emulating the behavior of the stars in the sky. So, for example, the ancient accounts of the creation of the sun, they will always describe the sun as appearing amidst tremendous lightning and thunder. And so the earliest words for sun, let's say in the Sumerian language, is Ud, U-D. And that word not only means sun, but it means storm and thunder, etc. And so the thunder god himself is always identified by that particular logogram. So the question arises, why would anyone associate the sun with lightning or storm? Well, nobody in their right mind would. All of these dancers, whether it's the American Indian or Greek ritual dances to Dionysus, they will always talk about the sun appearing in the sky amidst great lightning and thunder, and their dances will be designed to emulate the movements of the planets. They will have the sound effects accompanying it, heavy pounding of drums, bull roars, lightning like sounds. And so they're trying to emulate these actions of the gods as closely as they possibly can, given their early technology at their disposal.
Weren't they terrified? That's why they were trying to maybe sacrifice people to the gods to say, hey, don't cause this catastrophic event again.
Without question, these were unbelievably terrifying and dangerous events. Again, you just read Homer talking about Zeus's thunderbolt. He's talking about what an awe-inspiring, terrifying thing this was. So yes, that's part of the religious experience. It's an otherworldly, terrifying phenomenon that is at once awe-inspiring, beautiful, numinous, dangerous. A confrontation with the gods is not for the weak of heart, let's put it that way.
I think it was, I think I read that it was a lot of times during the eclipse, they were afraid that it could cause more darkness. So that's why they sacrifice or try to sacrifice people. So it wouldn't have this long, dark period again, because that's something they remembered, or was the stories that was passed down to them, that I guess after this event, there was darkness maybe for a long time.
That is correct. I mean, you're literally correct on all scores. So the cultures, whether we're talking about South America, North America, Egypt, doesn't make any difference where we're talking. They will all describe a period of darkness, or what they call the long night, when the sun was imprisoned during these cataclysmic events. And then subsequently, the sun god or warrior hero makes a recovery from that darkness, and again creates the world in the midst of that darkness. Whenever real eclipses happen after that, they automatically think back to the terror that was involved when darkness literally did block out the sun, and or a dragon swallowed the sun is a common mythological interpretation. So they will do various things to try and get rid of that eclipse. And one of the most common was they bang on pans, or make a lot of crazy noises to try and drive the dragon away from the sky. And these rituals are found all around the globe, in civilized cultures as well as primitive cultures. And as you say, many cultures, especially the Babylonian astronomers, they sacrificed human beings to overcome the eclipse. This is well known. It absolutely was a terrifying series of events, and they tried to perform numerous apotropaic rituals to prevent the long night from taking over again and to make the sun reappear.
Interesting. Your research suggests that the history of the solar system taught in modern textbook is utterly wrongheaded and divorced from reality. Could you elaborate on how your findings challenge current astronomical theories?
Well, again, if we are maintaining that the planet Venus and the planet Mars were only recently on radically different orbits than at present, certainly within the last 5,000 years. And so that right there contradicts every single modern textbook. And it leads to a series of ramifications or predictions that would never be expected from the conventional theory. So let's take a couple examples. Currently, you can't have water on Mars because it's too far away from the sun, it's too cold, doesn't have an atmosphere, etc. And yet, there are indications on Mars that it used to have tremendous supplies of water. Well, how is that possible? Well, the answer is if Mars was close to the Earth, as our findings suggest, and the Earth had water, Earth had an atmosphere, there's no reason Mars couldn't have had an atmosphere or plenty of water, let's just say 5,000 years ago, prior to these catastrophes when it was close to the Earth. Once you kind of get your mind around that possibility, then all of a sudden, a whole another range of thinking about the planet becomes possible. Certainly, it becomes easier to imagine certain life forms on Mars, whether we're talking about microorganisms making their way from the Earth to Mars, or whether they were on both planets at the same time, whether they were going back and forth. Once Mars moved away, of course, any of those microorganisms will probably have to move underground to survive. But it certainly wouldn't surprise me if we found some sort of life form buried, deep in the caves or underground canyons of Mars. It also wouldn't surprise me at all if the genes of those microorganisms were identical to some from the Earth and or vice versa. Whereas that would never be expected given the current orbit of Mars out in the middle of nowhere. Earlier, we mentioned the research of Wal Thornhill. Wal Thornhill has done some of the most amazing research on how Mars's surface got these bizarre pockmarks, canyons, mountains created out of nowhere. And so I would just refer readers to Wal's website for a catastrophic understanding of Mars's current surface. You can't look at Mars and say, yes, it's been peacefully traveling on the same orbit for 4 billion years, like Carl Sagan wanted to say. No, Mars is a catastrophe-ridden planet, and it looks, if you look at the rubble-strewn surface of Mars, it looks like that catastrophe happened in the relatively recent past. It doesn't look like it happened a gazillion years ago, like mainstream astronomers want you to believe.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I saw that on the Electric Universe. Yeah, he's amazing. And so are you, by the way, on Electric Universe. I really enjoy watching that series. I wish there was more. How long ago did you guys do that?
Oh boy, time kind of runs together, but Wall and I did some kind of a TV show for that Gaia production,
Gaia?
God, 5 or 6 years ago.
Mm.
Yeah. And Wall was fantastic. That was like a 10-hour episode or series of episodes. I would definitely refer viewers to that. I am not a big fan of that particular network at all, but they did do a very good job of computer simulation of what Wall was talking about as far as how did Mars get its scars, what happened on Mars and Venus, that type of stuff. So it's very helpful to help, just visualize what was going on. But certainly, we've participated in those conferences with Dave for, gosh, in my case, 40 some years, in Wall's case, since the early 90s, I would think. So a long, long time. So a lot of these speeches are available on the internet. And I would absolutely refer readers to the videos of Dave Talbot and Wall for further discussion. And of course, you can't do better than consult their works. So they wrote one book called Thunderbolt of the Gods, which is phenomenal. And a second book, I think, called The Electric Universe. I can't quite remember. But yeah, some research that definitely deserves more publicity than it's received.
Yeah, I agree. I never thought of the electric universe and that concept before until I saw it on Gaia, and that was absolutely amazing. You're right. It should be promoted more so people, be open-minded and maybe think outside the box. I don't think many of us do that. I want to ask one question,
Very
another
well
question.
said.
You're in your book, chapter 11, you wrote about the heaven and earth were one. Could you explain that?
Well, it's difficult to explain without the ancient writings before the reader, but basically, the pivotal event in creation myths around the globe is the separation of heaven and earth. And in virtually every one of those cultures, they will come right out and say, prior to that decisive event of the separation of heaven and earth were conjoined as one. That's a universal myth. And my book is just trying to offer a hypothesis on what the separation of heaven and earth means. And so interested readers can check it out and they'll learn the details. But it's certainly ongoing research. It's not like we would never claim to have all the answers there. This is a vast and complicated field, and we're just a handful of researchers, working independently, trying to put the pieces together in a puzzle.
So what is your next research? I mean, do you have something a new project that's coming up?
Well, first, most important plan is to have a future. And then try and get as much done as humanly possible. But I've literally got 5 books written on my computer right now, so I'm just trying to fine tune them and get them ready for publication. I've got one book on Dionysus, the Greek god, and talking about the rituals of that god, the origin of music, the origin of drama and dance. That's an exciting project. I've got a part 2 of the Turquoise Sun, which spends more time talking about how did the events of creation be memorialized in ancient monumental architecture, temple construction. Earlier you mentioned the pagodas. The pagoda shape is virtually identical to what the polar configuration used to look like. It reproduces it in great detail. That's a very exciting story. So that book will show how the Maya, the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, they devised the same structures in imitation of the skies. And it's when you can see the detail laid out, it's a very fascinating and, to my way of thinking, compelling argument. And so then I have another book coming out on Mars as the warrior hero, kind of elaborating on his mythology. And so that's just kind of the way it is, just trying to keep cranking out the research.
That's amazing. I'm looking forward to all of those books coming out. I can't wait. Well, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time, Ev. I appreciate that.
I can't thank you enough. It's been a pleasure to be here, and you're a wonderful hostess, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
I can't wait, to be honest.
Best
I can't
of
wait.
luck to you.
Oh, thank you. And that brings us to an end of another episode of the Sensible Hippie podcast. A heartfelt thank you to my special guest and friend, Ev Cochrane, for sharing his insights into the case of the Turquoise Sun. It's conversation like these that lighten up our understanding of the cosmos in the most unexpected ways. To my listeners, I want to express my deepest gratitude. Without you, this journey wouldn't even be possible. I encourage everyone to leave a positive rating on your favorite podcast platform. It's crucial for expanding our ohana and ensuring we can bring forward more enlightening conversation like these. To our YouTube ohana, Your likes and your subscriptions are invaluable. I want to thank you so much. Keep bringing me the thumbs up, keep following, and keep subscribing. And as we part ways today, let's keep the spirit of our Ohana strong and united in our quest for knowledge and understanding. So, stay curious and continue to seek out the wonders of our universe. Until the next time, take care, and remember, in the vast night sky, every star contributes to our collective light, guiding us towards our next discovery. Take care. Bye.
Oh, I wanna feel something. I just wanna breathe again. Dive into the deepest end. Oh, I wanna feel something. Let me get back in my body.